There are nights when the wind does not simply pass through the trees but seems to whisper names, and in the autumn of 1817, along the quiet banks of the Red River in Robertson County, Tennessee, something began whispering the name Bell in a voice that was neither fully human nor entirely of this world. The Bell family farm stood peaceful beneath fading sunlight, yet the calm was already an illusion because John Bell, a respected farmer known for discipline and faith, had seen something in his cornfield that refused to leave his thoughts, a strange animal with the body of a dog and the head of a rabbit sitting upright at the edge of the rows, staring at him with unblinking eyes before vanishing into thin air as if the earth itself had swallowed it. He told no one at first, dismissing it as exhaustion, but within days the family began hearing scratching sounds along the cabin walls at night, faint knocks that came in deliberate patterns, and the dragging noise of invisible chains across wooden floors where nothing lay. The disturbances grew bolder, shifting from simple sounds to whispers that hovered just beyond understanding before sharpening into clear words, soft voices that recited scripture and sang hymns with unsettling sweetness. The youngest daughter, Betsy Bell, soon became the center of the unseen attention as unseen hands tugged at her hair, pinched her skin, and pulled at her blankets while she tried to sleep, leaving her frightened and bruised beneath the dim glow of candlelight. The family prayed, read aloud from the Bible, and attempted to ignore it, but the voice only grew stronger, eventually introducing itself as Kate, laughing dryly when questioned, speaking with intelligence that chilled the blood. Neighbors were invited to witness the strange happenings, and inside the flickering firelit cabin the entity seemed to perform on command, answering questions, revealing secrets no stranger could know, and sometimes striking John Bell with unseen force that left red welts on his face. What terrified them most was not only the violence but the mind behind it, for this was no random haunting. It debated theology with visiting ministers, mocked skeptics, and promised openly that it had come with purpose. As winter crept closer and shadows lengthened across the Tennessee fields, the Bell home no longer felt like shelter but like a stage where something ancient had chosen to speak, and the whispers in the dark were no longer distant. They were patient, deliberate, and waiting. By the time the first frost settled over Robertson County, the Bell household had accepted a terrible truth. Whatever called itself Kate was not a passing disturbance but a presence that had rooted itself inside their home, and the nights grew heavier with expectation, as if the darkness itself waited for the voice to begin. It no longer limited itself to whispers, but spoke clearly from empty corners of the room, sometimes near the ceiling, sometimes beneath the floorboards, its tone shifting from gentle hymn to sharp mockery within a single breath. And when John Bell demanded to know what it wanted, the entity answered with unsettling calm that it had come for him, that he would not escape, that its purpose was tied to his suffering. Soon visitors crowded the small cabin, neighbors, skeptics, even traveling ministers, all eager to witness what frontier rumor had already transformed into legend, and before them the voice performed with eerie precision, answering biblical questions more fluently than many preachers, correcting misquoted scripture, and laughing when someone attempted to trick it. Yet its cruelty remained focused, for while it often ignored the sons, it tormented Betsy relentlessly, slapping her unseen, pulling her hair until she cried out, leaving marks on her skin that glowed red in the firelight, and though her parents prayed over her trembling form, the entity only responded with mocking applause. John Bell's health began to decline in quiet, creeping ways, his throat tightening unexpectedly, his limbs weakening as though invisible hands pressed upon him, and at night he felt a suffocating weight on his chest, as if something unseen leaned close to study his fear. Still, he refused to abandon the farm he had built with his own hands, believing that faith and resolve would drive the spirit away, but Kate seemed to thrive on his defiance, taunting him openly, predicting moments before he would cough or stumble, and once declaring before witnesses that it would see him dead before long. The air inside the cabin felt different now, thick and charged, the fire casting shadows that twisted unnaturally along the log walls while the voice drifted between tones, sometimes sounding like an old woman, sometimes like a child, sometimes like many voices layered together. And, as winter deepened and the Red River moved silent beneath sheets of ice, the Bell family realized that the haunting was no longer something happening to them. It was something living with them, listening, watching, and patiently moving toward a conclusion only it seemed to understand. As word of the haunting spread beyond the rolling fields of Robertson County, The Bell Farm transformed from a quiet homestead into a place of fearful pilgrimage, and people arrived on horseback and by wagon, some seeking proof of the supernatural, others hoping to expose a trick, yet none left unchanged, because the entity that called itself Kate seemed to grow stronger with every new pair of ears listening in the dark. It no longer waited for questions but spoke freely, greeting certain visitors by name before they introduced themselves, revealing private sins in calm detail, and laughing softly when grown men stumbled over their words. And on several nights the voice carried beyond the cabin walls into the yard, echoing through the trees as if the forest itself had learned to speak. One evening a local preacher challenged the spirit, demanding it declare whether it was of heaven or hell, and the response came sharp and measured. Neither confession nor denial, only a long recitation of scripture delivered with flawless clarity before ending in low, amused laughter that made the fire tremble in its hearth. Even more unsettling was the way the entity seemed to anticipate events, predicting arguments before they erupted, finishing sentences before they were spoken, and once warning that a visitor's horse would collapse before dawn, which it did, leaving the crowd shaken into silence. Betsy's torment intensified, unseen hands striking her cheeks while others watched. Helplessly, her braids yanked so violently that she cried out in pain, and though no attacker could be seen, the marks appeared instantly, convincing even hardened skeptics that something invisible moved among them. John Bell, once a pillar of strength, now appeared thinner, his voice strained, his hands trembling when he reached for his cup, and the entity mocked him openly, claiming that his time was narrowing, that each sunrise brought him closer to the end it had promised. Yet amid the cruelty there were moments of strange civility, for Kate occasionally spoke kindly to Lucy Bell, John's wife, offering brief pauses in the torment as if following rules known only to itself, and this shifting temperament confused the family more than pure malice would have. Outside, winter winds swept across the frozen fields, rattling shutters and bending tree branches like grasping fingers, and within the cabin the unseen presence moved freely from wall to wall, sometimes whispering beside one ear, sometimes thundering from the rafters, its intelligence undeniable, its purpose increasingly clear. And as the nights stretched longer and the visitors grew more numerous, the bell, which was no longer a rumor carried by neighbors, it was a living spectacle, deliberate and patient, tightening its unseen grip around the man it had chosen, while the rest of the family could only watch and wait for the next whisper in the dark. By early winter the Bell Farm no longer belonged entirely to the living, because each night seemed to unfold according to the will of the unseen presence, and the entity's confidence grew sharper, more deliberate, as if it sensed that doubt among the neighbors had finally turned into belief. The voice now spoke for hours without pause, shifting from mocking laughter to him, singing so soft and haunting that even those who feared it felt a strange pull toward its melody, and it began recounting stories of distant places and long-dead individuals with such precise detail that listeners swore it must have traveled beyond the limits of flesh. Yet beneath the performance was something colder, something focused, because its threats toward John Bell became more specific, describing the weakness in his body before it showed, predicting the stiffness in his limbs and the tremor in his jaw, and when he tried to pray aloud the voice would interrupt him mid-verse, correcting his words with cutting amusement. One night, as a storm rolled across the Tennessee countryside and rain struck the cabin roof like scattered gravel, the entity's tone deepened and declared before witnesses that it would soon deliver a sign of its power, and before dawn John Bell awoke gasping, unable to swallow, his throat seized by an invisible pressure that left him pale and shaken. Though neighbors suggested illness, none could ignore the way the voice whispered calmly from the shadows, claiming responsibility in a tone almost proud, as if tightening its grip one careful turn at a time. Meanwhile Betsy's suffering continued, though sometimes the entity spoke gently to her, warning her against certain friendships and hinting at a future it claimed to see, and this strange mixture of torment and guidance unsettled the family more than cruelty alone. Livestock on the farm grew restless after sunset, horses refusing to approach the barn, dogs whining at empty air, and more than once a distant laugh drifted across the frozen fields when no human stood nearby. Visitors still arrived, some determined to expose deception, but each left unsettled, for objects shifted without touch, voices answered from empty space, and secrets surfaced that no trick could explain. John Bell, weakened but stubborn, refused to abandon his home, though the lines in his face deepened and his steps slowed, And the entity's patience felt deliberate now, as though it were not merely haunting but waiting for a precise moment it had already chosen. And as icy winds pressed against the cabin walls and the firelight flickered uncertainly against the logs, the Bell family sensed that the haunting was approaching a turning point, something heavier than noise or spectacle, something that would soon move from warning into action. As the cold settled deeper into the Tennessee soil, the Bell cabin felt smaller each night, as though the walls themselves leaned inward to listen, and John Bell's strength continued to fade in ways no simple illness could explain, his hands trembling, his speech slurring at times while the unseen voice drifted calmly through the room claiming credit for every weakness. The entity no longer needed to prove its presence. It spoke when it wished and fell silent when it pleased, creating a tension, worse than constant noise, because the family never knew when the next whisper would cut through the dark. One evening, as Lucy Bell sat beside her husband's bed, the voice spoke softly from the corner near the hearth, announcing that John would not live much longer, that his suffering was nearing its final chapter, and though the words were delivered without shouting, their certainty froze the room more completely than winter air. When neighbors gathered again to pray, the entity interrupted them with sharp laughter, mocking their faith yet flawlessly finishing their verses, and at one point a small vial of dark liquid was discovered in the cupboard near John's bed. A bottle no one claimed to own, and when questioned, the voice declared that it had given him medicine and would give him more. Fear turned into quiet dread, for John's condition worsened rapidly after that night, his eyes unfocused, his breathing shallow, and the entity's tone shifted from cruel amusement to something almost triumphant. Yet amid the terror, there were moments of strange calm when the voice would fall silent for hours, leaving only the crackle of the fire and the fragile hope that perhaps it had finally gone. But just as that hope began to grow, a whisper would rise again from the shadows, reminding them that it was still there, still watching, and still waiting for the promise it had made to be fulfilled. The winter of 1820 settled like a final curtain over the Bell farm, and John Bell's condition declined with frightening speed. His once steady voice reduced to faint murmurs while the unseen presence lingered close, speaking less often now but with sharper intent, as though conserving its strength for a single inevitable moment. On the morning of December 20th, the family found John unresponsive, his face pale, his breathing shallow, and near his bed sat the same small vial of dark liquid that no one claimed, and when questioned, the voice answered calmly from somewhere above them that it had given him a final dose during the night. Attempts were made to force the liquid down a cat's throat as a test, and the animal convulsed and died within moments, sending a wave of horror through the room while the entity erupted into chilling laughter, declaring that it had kept its promise. By sunset, John Bell was dead, and as neighbors gathered in stunned silence, the voice began singing loudly through the cabin, hymns twisted with triumph, its tone echoing beyond the walls as if celebrating a victory long planned. At the funeral, witnesses claimed the singing could still be heard drifting faintly across the fields, carried on cold wind that bent the trees like silent mourners. Yet after John's death, the haunting shifted, its intensity easing slightly, as though the primary purpose had been fulfilled, though it did not vanish entirely, for it continued to speak to Lucy and occasionally torment Betsy, reminding them that it would leave only when it chose. The farm felt different now, emptier yet not free, because even in silence there remained the sense of unseen eyes resting upon the house, and though the worst had passed, the presence lingered like a shadow at dusk, neither fully gone nor fully at peace. After John Bell's death, the Bell which seemed to shift its attention more fully onto the rest of the family, and though the immediate threat to life had passed, the nights remained tense, filled with sudden noises, whispers from empty corners and objects moving without cause. Betsy continued to be the most affected, her hair pulled, blankets yanked, and soft touches leaving bruises that appeared and vanished like smoke, while Lucy tried desperately to shield her children with prayer and scripture, yet the voice ignored neither mother nor daughter, speaking with quiet authority, sometimes offering cryptic warnings or predictions, sometimes mocking their efforts with sharp laughter. Visitors still came, drawn by curiosity and fear, and each left unsettled, reporting glimpses of shadows that moved independently, sounds of voices arguing among themselves, and objects displaced in ways that defied reason. One local minister attempted an exorcism, reading aloud from a thick Bible, while sprinkling holy water, but the voice countered every word, reciting entire chapters flawlessly, correcting pronunciation, and delivering ominous commentary in between, and when the minister finally left, he admitted he had never seen anything so deliberate and intelligent in his life. Even outside the cabin, the presence could be felt, with horses refusing to enter the barn, dogs growling at empty air, and the trees along the Red River swaying though no wind blew. Betsy, though terrified, sometimes spoke to the voice as if pleading, asking why it tormented them, and Kate would answer in riddles or lullabies that sounded sweet until the meaning sank in, revealing threats hidden in gentle tones. Lucy Bell, exhausted and fearful, often sat by the fireplace for hours, listening as the entity conversed with itself in the shadows, whispering names and events only it could know, while the rest of the family tried to continue daily life, chopping wood, tending animals and cooking meals, all under the watch of an unseen, intelligent presence. Gradually, it became clear that the Bell which had moved beyond simple haunting, acting with purpose, shaping events, controlling fear, and weaving itself into every corner of the family's existence, leaving them trapped in a house where every sound, every shadow, and every movement could be a message from the entity that had chosen them long ago. As the seasons turned again and spring approached, the Bell Witch's presence remained constant, no longer focused solely on torment but asserting control over the home and land itself, and neighbors reported seeing strange lights near the cabin at night, hearing laughter carried on the wind, and sensing a cold, heavy presence that seemed to follow anyone who approached. Betsy's suffering continued, though in subtle ways, with scratches on her arms, whispers in her ear, and objects moving when no one touched them, and the entity often spoke directly to her in tones alternating between gentle lullabies and sharp, commanding orders, teaching lessons that only it understood. Lucy Bell became the family's protector, but even her prayers seemed to meet resistance, as though the spirit challenged faith itself, questioning her devotion and patience while reminding her that it remained patient, watching, and entirely in control. Visitors still came, some skeptics hoping to expose fraud, others drawn by curiosity or local rumor, and the entity responded to them individually, revealing secrets and predicting actions with unnerving accuracy, and sometimes striking those who doubted its power with unseen force, leaving red marks and welts that could not be explained. Livestock remained uneasy, refusing certain paths, whinnying without cause, and the forest near the cabin seemed alive with movement, shadows twisting in impossible ways while the air carried whispers too soft for most to hear clearly. Betsy, now more fearful than ever, began having visions or dreams where the entity appeared in human-like form, always watching, sometimes smiling, sometimes glaring, and in these dreams, it spoke of events yet to come, of dangers and promises bound to the family's fate. Lucy often stayed awake late into the night, listening to the soft, calculated laughter and occasional lullabies, feeling the house itself breathe with the spirit's presence, and realizing that their home was no longer merely a shelter but the center of a story larger than life, where the past, present, and some unexplainable future intersected under the watch of an intelligent, relentless force that would not leave until it had finished what it began. By the summer months, the Bell which had woven itself completely into the rhythm of the farm, no longer a visitor but an invisible inhabitant whose presence shaped every sound, every shadow, and every movement, and Betsy lived in constant awareness that at any moment the voice could strike, speak, or disappear entirely, leaving only a lingering sense of threat. Lucy continued her attempts to maintain normal life, tending animals, cooking, and trying to keep the children calm. Yet each creak of the cabin floor or rustle in the trees reminded her that she shared her home with something beyond understanding. Visitors still came, drawn by the legend, and they were met with impossible phenomena. Objects moving without touch, whispers from empty corners, and knowledge revealed that no human could have known, and some reported seeing a figure briefly, a shadow with human-like features, only to vanish when approached. Betsy's encounters intensified, sometimes leaving her with bruises or hair pulled so violently she screamed, and the voice spoke directly to her, alternating between lullabies that sounded sweet and riddles that chilled her to the bone, teaching lessons only it understood. John Bell's death remained the turning point, a proof of its power, and the family understood that Kate's patience had been long, deliberate, and calculated, her timing precise. Even the land itself seemed affected, with crops failing in areas touched by the unseen force, animals uneasy, and the Red River flowing differently, as though the very earth obeyed the entity's will. Nights grew longer in memory than in reality, and the family's sleep was fragmented by whispers, scratches, and distant laughter, leaving them exhausted yet unable to leave the home that had become a prison and stage for the entity's relentless performance. Through it all, Betsy clung to faith and whispered prayers. Lucy watched and protected, and the visitors left shaken, often muttering that they had never seen a haunting so deliberate, so intelligent, so purposeful, and the bell which continued, ever patient, ever observing, her presence undeniable in every corner of the farm. As autumn returned to Tennessee, the bell witch's presence became both familiar and terrifying, a constant thread woven through every sound and shadow of the farmhouse, and the family had come to live in a tense rhythm of fear and caution, never knowing when a whisper, a touch, or a sudden noise would demand attention. Betsy remained the focus of much of the entity's attention, her hair tugged, her blankets yanked, and mysterious scratches appearing without cause. Yet sometimes the voice would speak softly, almost kindly, delivering cryptic messages or warnings about future events, and this mixture of cruelty and guidance kept the family in a perpetual state of anxious vigilance. Lucy Bell, though exhausted and fearful, continued to protect her children, often standing in prayer by the hearth while the entity's laughter or whispers echoed through the cabin, testing her faith, mocking her patience, and proving that it could challenge belief itself. Visitors continued to arrive, some curious, others skeptical, all leaving shaken and disturbed after experiencing objects moving on their own, shadows twisting unnaturally, and the voice responding with knowledge only it could possess. Even the land surrounding the home seemed altered, animals restless, trees bending oddly, and the Red River flowing as though influenced by the unseen presence, reinforcing the idea that the Bell Witch's reach extended beyond walls into the world itself. And though the family could perform daily chores, tend livestock, and try to maintain normal life, each action was accompanied by the awareness that at any moment the entity could intervene, speak, or vanish, leaving them uncertain and watchful. Betsy clung to small comforts, whispered prayers under her breath, and listened carefully to the lullabies and riddles delivered by the voice, while Lucy watched over her children, understanding that the bell which was no longer merely a haunting, but a force intelligent, deliberate, patient, and fully entwined with the life of the family, a shadow that would not lift until it had completed its own unseen purpose. As winter approached once more, the Bell Witch's presence remained a constant, oppressive force, no longer simply haunting but shaping the family's daily life with deliberate precision, and the Bell household moved through each day with cautious rhythm, aware that the smallest action could provoke a response. Betsy experienced the most direct encounters, her hair yanked, blankets pulled, and mysterious scratches appearing on her arms and shoulders, yet the voice occasionally spoke softly, delivering cryptic warnings or messages that hinted at knowledge of future events, keeping her both terrified and strangely attentive. Lucy Bell, weary and determined, continued to protect her children through prayer, scripture, and vigilance. Yet the entity seemed to test her faith constantly, mocking her in whispers, twisting verses, and sometimes speaking from corners where no one could see, reminding her that its patience was long but deliberate. Neighbors still came, some seeking proof, others hoping to witness deception, yet each left unsettled, reporting impossible phenomena. Objects moving without contact, shadows that shifted independently, and whispers revealing secrets no human could know. Even the land around the farm seemed under its influence, livestock uneasy, trees bending unnaturally, and the Red River flowing with a strange cadence, all evidence that the entity's power extended beyond the walls of the cabin. Through it all, Betsy and Lucy learned to navigate the presence, interpreting lullabies, riddles, and subtle gestures, understanding that the bell which had become more than a haunting, it had become a deliberate force intertwined with their lives, intelligent, patient, and entirely in control, its ultimate purpose still hidden, waiting for the moment it had chosen to act fully. By the following spring, the bell which had fully established herself as an invisible yet undeniable inhabitant of the farmhouse, her presence no longer dependent on proving existence, but asserting authority over every sound, shadow, and movement, and the family had adapted to a daily life measured by whispers, sudden touches, and objects displaced with no human hand. Betsy, though still terrified, had grown attuned to the entity's patterns, recognizing the subtle shifts in tone, the lullabies that masked threats, and the cryptic warnings that foretold events yet to unfold. While Lucy maintained her vigil, praying and protecting as best she could, though every creak of the floor and gust of wind reminded her that the house was no longer fully their own. Visitors continued to arrive, some skeptical, some curious, yet all left disturbed by phenomena they could not explain, objects moving, shadows twisting unnaturally, and the voice revealing secrets or predicting actions with uncanny precision. Even the surrounding land seemed influenced, animals restless, crops uneven, and the Red River's flow appearing altered, evidence that the entity's reach extended beyond the home itself. Over time, the family accepted that the bell, which was not merely a spirit or trick, but an intelligent, deliberate, patient force, tied to their lives in ways impossible to escape, observing, influencing, and shaping their world. And though John Bell had passed years before, his presence lingered, only as a reminder of the entity's power and timing. For Kate's ultimate purpose remained unknown, hidden in whispers, lullabies, and the cold, deliberate silence that followed each interaction. The bell which, patient and relentless, remained entwined with the family and the land, a shadow over Robertson County whose story would ripple far beyond the small farmhouse, remembered in whispers, warnings, and the chilling certainty that some presences are never truly gone, and the night, when it fell, always carried the echo of a voice that waited, watched, and knew, leaving a legacy of fear, fascination, and mystery that endures to this day.